I am a firm believer that it's all about connections.
It is. Yeah.
Nobody gets anywhere or gets anything unless they know someone who can kind of help them. And that's why I think it's so important for people with disabilities to be out and about and to connect.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this installment of the Nick Speaks podcast, the podcast dedicated to the disabled community where we speak up, speak out, and speak loud. I hope you guys had a wonderful Thanksgiving and ate a lot of food. Today, I have a very special guest with me. I'm very proud to have her. You guys, have you heard the expression, tell God your plans and watch God laugh? Well, that's what kind of happened to my guest today. She wanted to be a teacher, and yet for the last several years, she's been in a field where more often than not, the people that work with her end up teaching her. And she is the director of OSDA, the Ohio Self-Determination Association. My guest today is Dana Charlton. Dana, welcome to the program. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you, Nicholas. I am honored to be here.
I am honored to have you on this Tuesday after Thanksgiving. Today's Monday, but we will air this tomorrow. So I'm honored to have you on this Tuesday after Thanksgiving. How was your Thanksgiving before we jump into other stuff? How was your Thanksgiving?
It was probably like everyone else's, full of family, food, fun, that kind of thing. It was very nice.
Yeah. Before we came on air, everybody, we were talking about whether you stuff the turkey or whether you eat the dressing. And we were just saying that we do dressing. We don't stuff the turkey. That seems kind of weird. And Dana was telling me about cornbread dressing, and I've never had cornbread dressing. So we're going to have to try that. So I'm looking forward to that one day soon. So, Dana, tell the audience of Nick Speaks how you got involved in the disabled field and what made you get into it. We'll start off there and then go from there.
Okay. Well, I graduated from Eastern Kentucky University with a bachelor's degree in art education, kindergarten through the 12th grade. And I did just a teeny bit of teaching before I got married and had 2 kids. And when my youngest was about almost 2, I decided it was time to go to work. And I interviewed and applied for teaching jobs in Franklin County and all the counties around and could not find anything. People just were not hiring. My neighbor next door had started his own insurance business and was working as a workshop manager in a sheltered workshop that was on the grounds of what was called Columbus State Institute at the time. It's now known as Columbus Developmental Center.
Right.
It was home, if you could call it that, to over 2,000 people who had been born with some sort of disability. He came over one night and said to my husband and I, our remedial academics teacher is leaving, and I can get you an interview if you would like to apply to replace her. And my response was, me? I know nothing about mental retardation, which is basically what the Institute was known for.
Right.
And he said, it doesn't matter. Most of what she does is art kinds of stuff anyway. Go ahead and interview. Let's see what happens. So I did. And several weeks later, I got a phone call and they offered me a job.
Wow.
I said yes and learned that my classroom was actually a basement in one of their 4-story residential buildings that housed about 80 men. And I inherited 36 students who came to class in groups. I think my largest group was 6. Some came individually. Many had very minimal disabilities. One woman had facial deformities, but that was it. One gentleman was deaf, but as far as I could tell, had no other disability. I wasn't even smart enough to go to the record room and pull people's records to read anything. Needless to say, I was quite nervous. So after about a month of wondering whether I should stay or not, I learned that I could take a class at Ohio State called Introduction to Mental Retardation, and the fee was waived. So I went there. I took classes over the next, 5 or 6 years and ended up with a master's degree in special ed.
Wow. And it's so interesting. So the teacher you were taking over for, did you ever hear of that position? Were you like, what is this?
I had never heard the term remedial academics before in my life.
Wow. And you had no experience prior to that as far as teaching, or you taught a little bit, I think you said.
I did. I had an aunt who was a teacher, and before I moved from Kentucky, I helped her out in an evening adult education class. And there was a young man.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I said, oh, okay, that's cool.
And there was a young man there who couldn't read or write and wanted to learn. So I worked with him, and I have a feeling there was a little bit of an intellectual disability, but that was the only experience I had in the disability field before accepting that position.
Wow, that's awesome. That's crazy that they even gave you the job with little to no experience.
I agree.
Yeah, that's amazing. One of the things that I found interesting when, for those of you who don't know, to give you a little bit of behind the scenes of how I do my podcast, I do a pre-call with all my guests to discuss what we're going to talk about. And one of the things that I found so interesting, Dana, is you said you never really grew up around people with disabilities. And so with you never really growing up around that, did you struggle getting into the field and being around those people with disabilities at first because you never really grew up around it?
I struggled, but my struggle was more about my own doubt that I could do the job. I found many of the people to have strange behaviors, to, in some instances, look very different from people I had typically been around.
Right.
But I'm not even sure how to say it. There was a connection, I guess is a good way to say it. I felt connected, and sometimes a little fearful, because there was a lot of unpredictable behavior that would happen in the classroom. But I never felt that I was in danger. There just seemed to be a connection. I didn't tell you this on our pre-call, but it's kind of an example of how it was. The third floor of the residential building were where about 16 men with very, very severe disabilities, intellectual disabilities, lived. And there was a lot of aggression displayed. I always thought I didn't blame them. I would feel aggressive if I lived in those conditions as well. But one day they didn't come down for lunch. And I waited and waited. And when they didn't come down, I went up to see what was wrong. And I found the two staff out in the middle of the living area. One of them had the feet of a young man, and the other was holding his arms. And he was laying on his back. And the woman said, I said, what can I do? And she said, come and hold his hands while I call security. We need to get him into the seclusion room. So I did, and she left, and he was kicking and struggling because obviously he didn't want to be there, and he spit. And when he spit, it hit the male who was holding his feet in the leg, and the guy let go of his feet and smacked the young man across the face. And my reaction was to scream, "Stop! Why did you do that?" And the guy looked at me and he said, "If you think you know how to do it better, then you handle it." And he just walked off. So here I am in the middle of a living area with 16 men, one of whom is on the floor with me holding his hands. And I had a moment of panic, obviously.
Yeah.
But he got very still. He stood up, but held onto my hand and led me to the seclusion room door, which I opened, and he walked in. And that was the end of it. So there was a connection. I can't explain it.
Wow. Do you think maybe it was because your demeanor was your demeanor calm? Do you think maybe it was your demeanor that?
I think there was a sense that I was not going to hurt him. I think he knew I defended him. And, that could all be, it could have been coincidence for all I know, but
maybe he heard you defend him after he got slapped in the face and thought, she's a good person, she's not gonna.
Right.
Wow, that's amazing.
So I started there in 73. In 75, 76, there was a big turnover at the top level administration, and someone from, I think, Massachusetts was brought in to clean up the place. And I was fortunate enough to be selected as a member of the team to help clean things up, which was great. And that was kind of when the whole focus on deinstitutionalization started, at least in Central Ohio.
Yeah, because it was a big turn in 1989, wasn't it? We talked about that. Talk about the big change in 1989, if you don't mind.
Okay. Well, let me start by saying that the deinstitutionalization process started with state funding. And I believe I remember it was about $2 million was appropriated to pay providers who operate licensed group homes in the community.
Right.
So Ohio statute at the time allowed or said that no more than, I'm trying to think how it was, unless you were related by blood or marriage, 2 or more people with a disability could not live together in the community and receive state funding. And it wasn't stated in the negative, it was stated in the positive. If you have a disability and you want state funding to live in the community, you must be in a licensed facility, which was licensed to a provider to provide services. So
in other words, they wouldn't let you live on your own in an apartment. You had to be in a licensed facility.
If you wanted state support.
Wow.
Yeah, you could live wherever, but you couldn't get government state funding.
You couldn't get government state funding unless you lived in a licensed group home.
Correct.
Wow.
So in the late 80s, the law was changed, and something called supported living was created in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And supported living basically said that 2 or more people not related by blood or marriage can live together in their own home or in an apartment that they might rent or a house that they might rent, and they could receive state funding or government funding. It was a very simple program. There was not a lot of state money available, but it was allocated out to the 88 county boards of DD in Ohio, and they administered the program. They certified the providers. They provided the funding. They provided quality assurance. And a lot of people, got to live in their own place. In the early 90s, a group of professionals who were in support of this program and didn't want it to lose its steam decided to start an organization, and it was the beginning of OSDA, but in those days it was called the Ohio Supported Living Association.
Right.
And I knew some of the people. Some worked for provider agencies, some worked for county boards. And after some number of years, they decided that their board should include people with disabilities.
Wow.
So I knew about them because at the time I was working at the Department of DD in the area of residential services. Somewhere along, 2000 maybe, they decided to change their name to the Ohio Self-Determination Association.
Yeah, that's a good segue to that, because you are now the director of OSDA. So tell the audience and tell me, how did you get that position, and what exactly does OSDA do for Ohioans with disabilities?
Well, I think the seed of, I can call it least restrictive environment or freedom for people with disability was planted in me when deinstitutionalization started back in the 70s, and I was still at Columbus Developmental Center. So over the years, as I worked for the department in the area of community services, I was always involved with OSLA and any kind of project or grant or endeavor that kind of pushed the envelope a little bit forward. So in the mid-90s, the department applied for a grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and we received $500,000 in each of 3 years to try to create a demonstration project where money allocated to someone in a sheltered workshop could be shifted to support them in an integrated community employment setting. And we worked with 4 counties, county boards. Lucas was the largest, and it was Knox, Marion, and Delaware. And then in 2000, we got a new administration, a new director, and he called me in his office one day and said, I want to continue to support self-determination in Ohio. Write up a proposal and tell me how much money you need. So it was about training, and I got my team together and we came up with some ideas and ended up getting, I think it was about $2 million to provide training.
Wow.
On self-determination to every single county in the state. And we did that with the help of a consultant from, I think, Missouri by the name of Derek Dufresne. So anyway, long story short, in 2006, I ended up retiring. At that time, I was the deputy director for community services for the Department of DD. And we were winding down the final year of a governor's election, which would probably be the final year of that director as well. So I decided to go ahead and retire. So I retired in 2006 and did a few different consulting jobs for a year or so. And then I was invited to join the board of the Ohio Self-Determination Association. And what I found when I got there is that they were working on a position description to hire an executive director. So one day while we were working, somebody said, you're a private consultant. Why don't you apply for the job? I did, and they hired me. And the best job I've ever had in my entire life.
You just have the best luck of getting hired.
But Nicholas, I am a firm believer that it's all about connections.
It is.
Nobody gets anywhere or gets anything unless they know someone who can kind of help them. And that's why I think it's so important for people with disabilities to be out and about and to connect and meet strangers and share likes and dislikes and interests. That's how things happen for people.
Yeah, it is. I've always been taught it's often not what you know, but who you know.
Very good. Yes. Well said.
And it's just, it's true. As education's great, but if you don't have anyone in the particular field that all that education is on a piece of paper until you find somebody that says, hey, we have a job over here, or I know this person who can get you here, or, whatever. And it's all about, we met through a connection of somebody else, and the biggest thing I can tell people with disabilities is, especially if you can't get out, get on social media, put yourself out there, because you never know who you're going to meet that can change your life for the better. I've met several people that have literally changed my life for the better just because of us meeting and saying, okay, well, you want to do this? Here's how I can help you. That's why I'm on this podcast right now, is because I met a guy who does podcasting through something we have in Ohio called Freer Discovery. And he was like, I can really help you. So here we are several episodes later, and, my podcast is picking up steam, and you never know what can happen when you meet the right person. So
right.
You've been in the field of working with disabled folks for how many years now, Dana?
Well, as of September 3rd of this year, it has been 51 years. It's a long time.
Wow.
Maybe it is time I retire.
No, we need you. And for those of you who are listening to this right now and not watching this, Dana does not look like she's been in this for 51 years. You look very good. So you can go on my YouTube channel and watch the video version and see Dana. Over the 51 years, what has working in this field taught you?
Compassion, faith, hope, I guess. It's kind of like we all, no matter who we are, disability or no disability, that's visible anyway. Everybody is good at some things and maybe not so good at others. And I think, we have to accept everyone for who they are and what they can bring to the table. And it all works when you do that.
Was there ever a time in the 51 years where you were like, this is not for me? And how did you get past that? If there was a time like that.
There were some bumpy times when when you work in an administrative capacity at a relatively high level in government, whether it's state government or probably worse at federal government. Every time there's a governor change and a director change, there's going to be upheaval. So it makes you nervous until the dust settles. So those were probably the bad times. I feel very fortunate that I seem to always be at the right place at the right time when something new and innovative was on the brink of getting started, and I was able to somehow make sure I got to be part of it. For 51 years, I kept saying in a joking manner, I'm probably going to get fired for doing this, but it's the right thing. But, I grew up in central Kentucky, which is kind of the heart of the bluegrass, with a lot of people around me who had a ton of Southern charm. So I kind of knew how to be pushy without being antagonistic. So I think that helped a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. That Southern charm always helps. And luckily I have grandparents from West Virginia, so it's kind of rubbed off on me. I want to circle back a little bit before we finish up, because I want to get into specifics about, if someone from Ohio is listening and they've never heard of the Ohio Self-Determination Association, what are some of the resources that you can give someone who wants to get involved with advocacy and that sort of thing?
Okay. Well, OSDA is recognized as a nonprofit policy advocacy organization.
Okay.
So the federal government has approved us as a 501c6, which means it's different from a C3, which is a charitable organization, in two main ways. One is we can lobby legislators of all sorts, state, federal, agency directors, and we don't have any restrictions on that. And the second way is we can accept donations or money from people and organizations, but it cannot be claimed as a charitable donation. In some situations, the donor might be able to declare it as a business expense. We have a 19-member board. Our 990 that is filed with the federal government every year shows us to have no employees because we're really, really small with an annual budget of, somewhere around the neighborhood of $160,000. I'm an independent contractor, and we have contracts with businesses to do all of our behind-the-scenes kind of thing. Like our accounting is handled by a CPA firm. We have a website guy that we call on when we need work. We have an organization that does mostly training and behavior support consulting that we contract with for administrative support, which means they give us a mailing address, they open a mail, take our checks to the bank, communicate with our accountant, provide us with access to storage and printing and a meeting room if we need it. So we don't have a lot of expenses. Our major effort is, we have several. I shouldn't say our major effort. In 2011, we started receiving funds from the Ohio Development Disability Council, and it helps support our Project STIR leadership advocacy training. And it's very basic training that is taught by people with disabilities to people with disabilities and their personal allies that pretty much helps people find their voice and gain the confidence to start speaking up for themselves and to do so in a way that people will listen. We have trained, I would say since 2010, probably 1,500 people with disabilities across Ohio and 1,000 allies.
Wow, 1,500 and 1,000 allies?
We have somewhere between 35 and 40 statewide Project STIR trainers, all of whom are people with disabilities who get support from a personal ally who functions as their coach, helps them practice for training, goes with them to training sessions for support if and when they need it. Recently, we did a pilot with the Ohio Department of Education. It provided the training to youth in transition in one of the Cleveland city schools. And it was a little different because it was a mix of teenagers who were both in traditional classes and those in special ed classes. But it was a big hit, and we're working to try to do 2 more. This year. Typically, we do between 3 and 5 training sessions every year. We couldn't do it without the support we get from local county boards of developmental disabilities. They all have advocacy coordinators on their staff, and those people are able, as part of their job, to work with local folks who have a disability to help them participate in training and be trainers. And it's, even though the staff get paid, they get paid by the county board of DD, not by us. And then we also have county boards who will sponsor trainings. So we kind of partner with a board in a certain area and target folks who live in that particular county to participate in the training.
That's awesome.
That's the big thing and the most long-standing thing. And then a second is our Synergy Conference, which for the last several years is in Kalahari up in Sandusky, Ohio.
Yeah, and I was there on Thursday, a part of a transportation which will be coming out on the podcast very soon. And it was a lot of fun. I'm going to go all 3 days next year. I'm so excited. It was a lot of fun.
That's great. Well, this year we had 987 people registered.
Yeah, I heard it was the biggest one you guys had.
Was. And it's hosted by 4 organizations who partner. And OSDA is one. People First of Ohio is the second. PAR, which is a professional organization that provides a lot of training in Ohio so that social workers and teachers and others can get the training they need for continuing education credit. And the 4th organization is the Ohio Alliance of Direct Support Professionals.
Yeah.
OEDC.
They're awesome too. And does OSDA have a website that people can go to and look? I'm going to put it in the show notes as well. But you can go ahead and give that website.
It's www.osdaohio.org.
Awesome. And so people can go and get more resources. You can contact Dana there, and she'll be a great help to you. I've lived in Ohio for almost 10 years now, and it's one of the biggest blessings. Ohio, I believe, is one of the best places to live for people with disabilities, because our benefits are so vast and we have so many different things for people with disabilities. Dana, before we wrap up, this is going to be my last question. Before we wrap up, what would you just say to somebody that is disabled and that really doesn't have much of a voice? How would you help them? How would you help them gain their voice? What would you say that they need to do? Because maybe they want to move out on their own, but they don't have that family support. Maybe they want to start being more independent, but they just don't know how to express that. What would you say to them?
Well, I think my obvious first response is help them participate in a Project STIR training so they can see and meet other people who are learning to do the same thing.
Right.
And I will mention that OSDA is great at collaborating with other organizations. And Project STIR has become the interest of several. We just received funds from United Healthcare to support people participating in Project STAR training if they don't have the funds to do it themselves, if the county board where they live is not able to help them or maybe has reached their limit for that particular time period. We also have funds from the Ohio Association of County Boards. We're working with them on a kind of collaborative program where they give us funds each year in order to help them create an advocacy advisory council that will work directly with the board members of the Ohio Association of County Boards. And this is an effort to help folks get the training and experience they need to apply for and be appointed to a local county board of DD. So that would be the first thing that I would try to do for the person. I think the second would be to just spend some time learning more about that person's situation to the extent they're willing to share. You know, what is it that you want in your life? There's some great tools out there that you can use to kind of help people analyze themselves, if you will. And you've probably heard of Charting the Life course.
Yes.
A great set of tools. You can, just kind of respond to the questions that are on the forms that they create. And it makes you think about what you're really feeling and what you really want. And then, if you do it with another person and you write those things down, and then you start looking around your community and with your personal connections and investigating technology and all that kind of stuff, then you begin to learn how to connect to things that can help you. And, we do an introductory lesson to that when we teach Project STAR. And then it's a matter of kind of setting your own agenda and saying to your SSA, if you have one, and if not, you should get one. I want to have a meeting and I want to talk about this.
Yeah.
And I want you to help me figure out how to move closer to this particular situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's all about learning to be assertive and to not just accept what somebody's going to give.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those of you who don't understand what an SSA is, it's a support coordinator that helps you run your case in your day-to-day living. Sometimes we use a lot of acronyms and people are like, wait, what are you talking about? It's different in every state. And I think Ohio is one of the few states that are still operate county boards. So it may not be the same in every state, but whatever advocacy groups you have, get in those because they're everywhere. And especially a lot of them these days since the pandemic, they're virtual. And so, believe it or not, I know a lot of parents and a lot of family members have probably told you, disabled folks, that your life is not in your hands. And your life is in your hands. You can make your own choices. You can make the life that you want. You just have to determine, this is the way it's going to be. And it's going to be scary. It took me a long time to stand up to a group of people that thought I would never be here, be on my own and be doing things that I'm doing now. But it is possible. And with people like Dana, and I hope she stays in the field until she can anymore, because we need people like her, you're in good hands. Dana, thank you so much for joining me today on Nick Speaks, and I hope this episode has really helped a lot of people, and especially if you're considering being in the disabled field, I hope this episode has helped a lot of people. Dana, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. And we will see you next week on a new episode of Nick Speaks, the podcast dedicated to giving the disabled a voice, where we speak up, speak out, and speak loud. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nick. Bye-bye.
Thank you.